Long before modern borders hardened the idea of the Americas, and long before textbooks narrowed the story of the New World into neat European chapters, there existed a black polity in the Western Hemisphere that functioned not as a fleeting rebellion or a minor settlement, but as a fully realized African kingdom reborn on American soil. It had rulers, laws, diplomacy, armies, agriculture, religious life, and an identity rooted unmistakably in Africa. For more than a century, it resisted the most powerful colonial empires of its age. When it finally fell, its memory was deliberately flattened, reframed, and pushed to the margins of history. Today, most people encounter it, if at all, as a footnote. Yet for those who lived under its banners, it was a nation. Its name was Palmares. To understand how a true African kingdom could rise in the Americas, one must first step into the terror of the Atlantic world in the 16th century. The Portuguese colony of Brazil had become one of the engines of the transatlantic slave trade, drawing tens of thousands of Africans from Angola, Congo, the Gold Coast, and the Bight of Benin. These men and women were not cultural blanks. Many came from centralized states with kings, military hierarchies, religious institutions, and agricultural knowledge adapted to tropical environments. When they were forced into Brazilian plantations, they carried these systems with them, not as nostalgia, but as living memory. From the earliest years of colonization, Africans fled. Some escaped alone, some in small groups, and others in coordinated waves following revolts. They moved into the dense interior forests of northeastern Brazil, a region difficult for Europeans to navigate but familiar in climate and ecology to people from Central and West Africa. There, they built mocambos, autonomous settlements of escaped Africans, indigenous allies, and later Afro-Brazilian descendants. Over time, these mocambos did not remain isolated. They federated, united by shared defense, kinship, and political leadership. What emerged was not a camp, nor a band, but a state. Palmares reached its height in the 17th century, occupying a vast territory in what is now the state of Alagoas. Contemporary Portuguese accounts describe it as containing thousands of inhabitants, with estimates ranging from 20,000 to over 30,000 people. This population alone places Palmares on the scale of recognized kingdoms of its era, rivaling many European colonial towns in size and organization. Its capital, often referred to as Macaco, functioned as a political and military center surrounded by smaller villages that paid allegiance to a central authority. At the heart of Palmares stood a monarchy. Its most famous ruler, Gonga Zumba, bore a title derived from Central African political traditions, particularly from the Kingdom of Congo and neighboring polities. Gonga denoted a sacred or noble status, while Zumba carried connotations of leadership and power. This was not accidental naming. Gonga Zumba ruled as a king, overseeing diplomacy, internal governance, and warfare. Beneath him existed a structured leadership system with chiefs responsible for individual settlements, echoing African models of decentralized but unified governance. Palmares' social structure was equally sophisticated. Land was collectively worked, with agriculture forming the backbone of the economy. Crops included cassava, maize, beans, and sugarcane, cultivated using techniques Africans adapted to the Brazilian environment. Hunting, fishing, and trade supplemented food production. Palmares traded with nearby Portuguese settlements, sometimes through intermediaries, exchanging food and crafts for weapons and tools. This trade was not evidence of dependency, but of strategic engagement with colonial economies on Palmarino terms. Religion and spirituality in Palmares further reveal its African identity. While Catholic elements filtered in through contact with Europeans and baptized Africans, traditional African cosmologies remained central. Ancestor reverence, spirit mediation, and ritual leadership were woven into daily life. These practices reinforced communal bonds and legitimized political authority, just as they had in African homelands. European chroniclers often dismissed these beliefs as superstition, yet they recognized their power to unify and motivate Palmarino society. What truly terrified colonial authorities, however, was Palmares' military strength. For decades, Portuguese and Dutch forces launched expeditions to destroy it, and for decades they failed. Palmarino warriors were experts in guerrilla warfare, using the forest as a weapon. They constructed fortifications, trenches, and watchtowers, and maintained early warning systems that allowed villages to evacuate or mobilize before attacks. Weapons included bows, spears, and firearms captured or acquired through trade. Military training was systematic, and participation in defense was communal responsibility. The existence of Palmares represented more than a local threat. It was a living contradiction of the colonial worldview. European ideology insisted that Africans were naturally suited to enslavement, incapable of self-rule, and dependent on European civilization. Palmares shattered this myth daily. It demonstrated that Africans could not only survive outside slavery, but create a prosperous, organized, and enduring state in the Americas. Its mere survival inspired enslaved Africans across Brazil, fueling escapes and rebellions. Plantation owners fear that Palmares was not just a refuge, but a beacon. This fear shaped the way Palmares would later be remembered, or more accurately, forgotten. When diplomacy failed and military campaigns intensified, the Portuguese crown committed immense resources to its destruction. In the late 17th century, professional bandeirantes, mercenary slave hunters armed with artillery, were hired to crush the kingdom. After years of brutal fighting, Macaco fell in 1694. Gonga Zumba had already been deposed amid internal conflict, and leadership passed to Zumbi, a younger commander who rejected any compromise with slavery and vowed total resistance. Zumbi's final stand became legendary. Even after the capital's destruction, resistance continued in scattered strongholds. Zumbi himself was captured and killed in 1695, his head displayed publicly in Recife to prove that he was not immortal. The message was clear. This was not merely a military victory. It was a symbolic execution meant to erase hope. Yet erasure requires more than violence. It requires narrative control. Colonial chroniclers reframed Palmares as a nest of criminals, fugitives, and savages rather than a legitimate polity. Later historians, writing within Eurocentric frameworks, minimized its scale, shortened its lifespan, and stripped it of political meaning. In many textbooks, Palmares appeared briefly, if at all, described as a slave rebellion rather than an African kingdom in exile. This reframing had lasting consequences. By denying Palmares its status as a kingdom, history denied Africans in the Americas their agency as state builders. The story of the New World remained one of European creation, with Africans cast solely as labor. Even when abolitionist narratives acknowledged resistance, they often emphasized individual heroism rather than collective governance. Palmares, with its kings, laws, and diplomacy, did not fit comfortably into such narratives. The erasure of Palmares also intersects with a marginalization of African political traditions more broadly. African states were frequently depicted as primitive or unstable, a portrayal that justified colonial domination. Recognizing Palmares as an African kingdom challenges that portrayal, forcing a reevaluation of what Africans brought with them across the Atlantic. They carried blueprints for society, not just memories of freedom. In Brazil today, Palmares has re-emerged as a symbol of Black resistance and identity. Zumbi is honored annually on Black Consciousness Day, and the term Quilombo, once used dismissively, has been reclaimed as a marker of heritage. Yet even now, international histories often gloss over Palmares or isolate it from broader discussions of statehood. It remains easier for some to celebrate abstract resistance than to confront the reality of African sovereignty in the Americas. Palmares was not unique in its impulse, but was unparalleled in its longevity and scale. Other maroon communities arose throughout the Caribbean and the Americas, from Suriname to Jamaica, but Palmares stood as the clearest example of an African kingdom transplanted and transformed by New World conditions. Its survival for over a century was not an accident. It was the result of inherited knowledge, adaptive leadership, and collective will. To call Palmares an African kingdom in the Americas is not romantic exaggeration. It is a historically grounded description supported by contemporary accounts, archaeology, and comparative political analysis. It had territory, population, governance, military defense, and cultural continuity. If such a polity had been founded by Europeans, it would occupy chapters, not paragraphs, in world history. The fact that it does not tells us less about Palmares and more about the priorities of historical storytelling. History, as recorded, has often served power. Palmares threatened colonial power in life, and it threatened historical power in memory. Erasing it was not a mistake. It was a continuation of conquest by other means. Yet memory has a way of resurfacing. Each generation that rediscovers Palmares restores a piece of a larger truth, that the African presence in the Americas was not solely defined by chains, and that African political genius did not vanish at the shoreline. It crossed the Atlantic, took root in foreign soil, and for a time stood unbroken. Palmares was a kingdom. It was African. It was American. And its erasure from history books is one of the most revealing silences in the story of the modern world.